forgot that he was hotspotting his phone to the internet because we're in the garage again.
My parents' garage.
Yep. And so we lost internet connection. Anyways, lesson learned, don't drop your hotspot. And last week, sorry about those that were jumping into Jess Watson's conversation. I got very sick and I am better now. I had blood poisoning in association with mastitis, which is because I'm still nursing Dylan, our 8-month-old. Anyways, better now. Good to go. Had to take Hell first, but she will be on next week. So that's super exciting. Jess Watson's the one that sailed around the world as a 16-year-old
Yeah, a pretty amazing adventure. So Jess will be on this time. Well, actually an hour earlier next week. So on Wednesday, 12 p.m.
But today,
who do we have, Lauren?
We have Brando Yelavich, and we are talking about a topic that I think needs to be talked more about. Because when I went on an expedition, there's definitely a shadow side of going, out of your comfort zone, jumping off the ledge and coming back from that point. So today we will be talking about reintegration. What happens when you've had a life-changing experience and you come back to, I guess, quote unquote, real life?
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about Brando and some of the epic things he's done to have that experience over and over and over again? This guy hasn't just gone on one epic adventures. He's been on many.
Well, I will, but I want to say that, it's something that it's really, really not talked about. I mean, you go back on these big things and everything feels wrong. I call it the post-expedition depression or post... Oh,
sorry, you have an eyelash.
It's intimate. You wouldn't do that if I was just a general co-worker, would you? Or maybe you would. But yeah, you come back from these expeditions and, you've gone on these mind-bending, life-altering trips. And
spent years planning for it. So it's not just the, X amount of days that you're out there. It's your whole life has shifted to a different priorities.
Yeah, 100%. And so you come back and sometimes life doesn't fit or doesn't seem to fit too well. And, if you're in relationships with people sometimes and you go on trips and they stay behind, you come back and realize that you don't fit as well. Hence why we went on our last expedition together, trying to make sure that doesn't happen to us.
That's why we did it.
Yes.
But it is something you actually talk about. Justin calls it post-expedition depression. And apparently it's a thing that's kind of talked about behind closed doors for a lot of you come back and you're on this high and everybody's talking about what you've done.
Yeah,
but you're
in the media.
Yeah, but you're in a very different state of reintegrating. I mean, I remember even physically the sounds back in the city were really jarring. Like if a couple people were talking or I could hear music and TVs on the back, I couldn't focus. So being out in the outback for 102 days actually changed my sensorial perspective of what's normal, let alone, your emotional perspective.
Well, Brando Yelavich, he's actually beat our record of 102 days in the outback because he was out there for 130. But I'll run through.
And he didn't just cross the outback.
He crossed the whole bloody country. I'm feeling really bad about myself now. So anyway, Brando is no stranger to adventure. Like he's a pretty just epic bloke. And I remember following this guy when he first started doing his little walk, or maybe just after his little walk right around New Zealand. So he had a pretty wild upbringing. I think he fell off the tracks a little bit. And it was a venture that kind of righted him back up. So he walked around the entire coast of New Zealand. And now I'm just riffing here. It was something like 600 days and 8,000 odd kilometers. That's epic. 2 years walking. And on this trip was a real sort of eye-opener for him, having to sort of hunt, gather, live off the land to a degree, and be very confronted by all that stuff. And since then, he's done other cool trips. He's crossed the Greenland Icecap. He has gone around Vancouver Island in a kayak, paddling around with his fiancée, Naya, which is pretty awesome, a test of a relationship. And he's done some stuff in the Himalayas on an aid expedition. But the one that we're really focusing on is his adventure in the outback. So he cycled 5,555 kilometers over 130 days across Australia from its widest points, like from Steep Point through to like where Cape Byron is.
Across every desert.
Across, all through the deserts. And the first person to actually ever do that. Now, before we actually get Brando in, because I can't wait for this one, and I've been talking about this guy for ages to Lauren, and we've been following him and all that jazz, I want to play a video that he's shared with us from his experience in the outback. So have a watch of this.
My purpose in life is to empower and inspire other people to do what they love, to take control of their life and live it. Like life, you wake up and you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen during today or tomorrow or even the next 5 minutes. It's as simple as that. I just want to live life. I want to live every single day. Maybe in the future they'll reach some point in their life where things are tough, you know, things just aren't going my way, things aren't good for me, and maybe they look back on this experience that they shared with me crossing Australia and think, man, I pushed myself so hard and it was one of the hardest things that I've ever done, but I pushed through and it got better.
Brando, I'm just about to start crying.
I'm having flashbacks to the desert. I remember talking to you out there, but definitely seeing that footage makes me feel like I have flies on me again and am covered in red dirt.
How are you, Brando?
Welcome.
I am good, man. That little video brought back some emotions and memories for me as well. It's been a while since I've actually sat down and actually even thought about Australia.
Yeah, because you're coming to us from New Zealand, the land of empathetic warrior women leaders and low COVID rates. How are you going down there?
It's pretty surreal to know that the rest of the world is in this huge pandemic, whereas somehow, luckily, here in New Zealand, you know, life's like normal. There's nothing that's different about life right now than, you know, 5 months ago, just here.
I know, it's interesting. Well, actually, that's a big reason why we kind of wanted to have you on this week, because obviously New Zealand has had this gone through, you know, the world is going through this pandemic. New Zealand has gone through a life-changing experience for many people where they were quarantined and working from home, and now they're going back into the world. In New South Wales, you know, we went through an element of that, and now people are kind of reintegrating back into their normal life. So back into the office, you know, working from home less. And I think for certain people, it's kind of like they're putting on an old jumper that doesn't quite fit anymore. And they're not sure how that works. And I thought, well, who better to talk to than, you know, explorer that's kind of gone out on these things, chasing something, just like you said in your documentary, you know, like, I want to live life every single day. And you can, and my question is, can you only do that out on expedition? And if so, what is that like when you come home? How do you integrate? Is it seamless? No big deal. I got a shower and a beer and I'm sweet and boom, back into it? Or do you come back changed, and is that a struggle or is that a good thing? I'd love to dive into some of your thoughts around that and a story that you want to share if you can.
Yeah, well, first of all, kia ora from New Zealand.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Yeah, the coming back from expeditions is the hardest part about them. You know, they're all about struggles, and there is no struggle that's bigger than the end. Uh, for a lot of reasons. You know, I want to take you back to my very first expedition when I walked around the coastline in New Zealand, because that one for me was the first time in my life I realized the uh, what would you call it, cliche quote, life's not about the finish line, it's about everything in between the start and the end.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't say I rushed through that journey, but I couldn't wait to get to the end and put my hands up in the air and be like, yeah, I'm done, I'm back. And it wasn't until the last 3 days of the journey that suddenly it dawned on me that life was going to change forever when I finished this. For a bit of context, when I left on that first expedition, I was pretty much addicted to drugs. I was thinking about joining a gang. I was up to all sorts of not savory behavior. And so when I came back, my life was going to be different regardless. But it was terrifying, you know. It was so terrifying to have this massive unknown with so many different potential outcomes of where it could go and how I could get there. And at that stage, you know, I was 20. I didn't really know too much about the world other than what I'd kind of been taught or told, and then what I'd come up with while I was out there in my head for 600 days. Now, when I got to the finish line, I walked around the last corner just after walking every single beach in New Zealand, and I walked up, I put my hands in the air and I yelled them back, and there was about 40 people there, all different people that I'd met along the way, my mum and dad, and they were waving flags and they were cheering. It was just this overwhelming sense of achievement, immediately followed by this feeling of like, oh, what next? Like, what do I do now? And I got in the car and we drove home. I drove 8 hours back to Auckland from the top, and I was kind of a little bit lucky on that first expedition because the opportunities that came from it being so young and being the first person to have done that thing, the opportunities just kind of presented themselves to me. I got a book deal. I had people approaching me about making a film, and there was just lots and lots of stuff going on. And then the kind of social media thing blew up, and suddenly I started doing these adventures for not necessarily for the likes, but to share my adventure online to inspire other people to get out and just live their lives, you know, not be determined what their mum or their dad or their teachers or societies told them that they must do, but to just do what they want to do. Now, that kind of, it took me from this one place of addiction in the beginning into this whole other more healthy addiction of adventure, and that led me to be living this adventure life for now the last 7 years. It's just been go, 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 Greenland, Canada, Nepal, New Zealand, Australia, just constant, and it's been so fun. But every time I've come back from each of those expeditions, there's been like this 3-month window of just horrid depression and just this overwhelming feeling of like I've lost my purpose. You know, I've lost the purpose to live. The will to live is gone because my will to live was so determined by adventure and so determined by where I was going to go next. You know, achieving that goal, achieving that one thing in my life that, you know, everything seemed to evolve around. And then Australia happened. I went out there not only for myself. I wanted to use Australia as a space to share that adventure lifestyle and share that experience with other people. And what that did in turn, it taught me a lot about myself, because I'm so used to being out there solo and spending so much time internal in my own head. But when there's another person, a stranger, because that's who they were just complete strangers, people that I just met along the way. My criteria for application to come and join me in the outback was, hey, if somebody sends me a message like people do and say, hey, I would love to do this, you're coming.
You asked me.
To get here.
You asked me at one stage, and I was like so close to packing up and coming.
Except for we're having a baby, so
yeah,
good.
it wouldn't have been popular. Yeah.
Well, I was having the baby.
So, as I got closer and closer to the end of the Australia journey, I was, I guess, ticking off lots of these so-called childhood traumas that had been stopping me from being the best version of myself throughout my whole life. And when I say ticking them off, I mean I was working through them mentally, and I was processing them by thinking about them and applying reason to them, and just working through them in a way that gives me the ability to make sense of things. As I got closer and closer to the end of this journey, something really strange started happening. I don't think it was necessarily only to do with myself and my mental state at the time, but surrounding me was, in my opinion, quite a lot of negative energy or negative things going on. The bushfires were one big one. I'd just been, in my opinion, the most wild and natural place on Earth. The Australian outback, it's so untouched because it's inaccessible. It's a desert. And to be so immersed, living under the moon, under the stars for so long, and then to almost instantly hit a road and then be surrounded by bushfires and start seeing rubbish on the sides of the road and fences. Like, fences don't exist in the outback. You can just ride your bicycle in a straight line for as long as you want, and the only thing you have to worry about is nothing. It was winter, there was no snakes. So I hit this civilization. I hit civilization and instantly, I guess, started already feeling that negative after feeling that you get once the expedition's done, because I knew what I was coming back to. I'd experienced it so many times before, and that really made the last 2 weeks not the best for me. I didn't want to end. I didn't want it to be over because it was so fun.
You really slowed down, didn't you, towards the end? Because I remember following the tracker, and you could see. Oh, I could see it. I was like, he's pulling the handbrake because he doesn't want it to stop, because he doesn't want to. Well, I thought maybe face real life.
And that's totally it. I knew that when I came back, not only was it going to be hard, it was going to be so much harder than any of my other expeditions, because I was coming back to Australia, to a country that I've never spent time in, and I was going to be there until the end of the year. I had no friends where I was living. I had no support group, and it was just, it was so hard. I did manage to get myself to the finish line as much as I didn't want to be there, and I dove into the ocean. There was humpback whales out in the water while I was swimming. It was just, it was totally a magical moment. And when I think about the end, it was magical. It was so special to, complete that goal that I'd set. Or the completion thing is so important, because if I hadn't have finished forever for the rest of my life, I would have always had this what if I had done that? What are the opportunities that could have come if I had done that? And I don't like having the what if or the why questions there. If I'm not going to finish something, if I set out to do something, it's gonna be finished one way or another, even if I have to change the way that I do it.
Mm-hmm. And
coming back, I've kind of been trying to portray, it was the hardest coming back and reintegration of my entire life. And in a lot of ways, I never did come back from Australia. There's a large part of me that I left in the outback, and not necessarily a good part or a bad part. It's just a part of my life that never came home. Reintegrating, I don't think you ever do. It's not possible to reintegrate. Humans are adaptable, and that's one thing that I've learned from all these big expeditions is the speed that we can adapt to things is just absolutely unreal. I went from being in New Zealand to being in Greenland in -50 and adapted, and then I came back and I adapted, And so rather than reintegrating, you just have to readapt into this normal life that everyone else is living. And the key kind of thing there for me was learning that I'm never going to be the same as I was before, and the best way to reintegrate is to take all of the good parts of the things that I've done and the things that I've learned out there and apply them to my everyday life while trying to make sense of everyday life.
It's so true. It's really interesting because I think, especially with COVID, people are seeing how we can adapt in a way that we never have. I mean, who would have thought, 5 months ago that most businesses would have flexible working for almost 100% of their staff? I mean, that businesses do not move typically very quickly like humans can. I think we forget that as humans, that's something that we're able to adapt and change. So I think we've learned that. And now we're facing what everybody's calling the new normal. And for me, I see that as going forward. But I think some people think of that as going back. So I think there's a big thing for you when you return from expedition, what has been your experience, and do you try to, I guess, go back in any ways in terms of, I'm just going back into where I was, or, paving this way forward? What does that look like for you? Like, what are you doing now potentially that you never thought you would be doing at the start of the Outback? Or did you go back to life as you thought you would? I mean, you're obviously not in a gang and on drugs as far as we know. So you obviously didn't go back to your old life around New Zealand. So what does that look like post this last expedition?
Yeah, so it's like a really interesting topic of conversation, purely because when I've come back from all of my other expeditions, except for this one, I have just started planning the next one. Yeah. I've just started planning.
That's that adventure addiction.
And that's the addiction for me. So when I came back from this one, I realized that there's an addiction in my life which is starting to become unhealthy, not only for, the social element. I didn't really have friends. I've got friends, but they're all over the world, and I never see them. I'm always off, and then I come home and I catch up with my mates who I've known forever, but I only see them for a couple of weeks, and then I'm fully in hyper-focused adventure planning mode, and everybody in my life gets forgotten about during that time. It's literally like a funnel, and when I get back from the adventure, I'm in the start of the funnel, and within 3 weeks, the funnel's this tiny little hole, and that's all of my focus, just in that little hole, and nothing else matters.
I've got kind of just touch a point on that. I mean, when you say that, you come back and you've got to do that compulsion, that addiction to do another adventure. How much is ego wrapped up into that? Because, I mean, for me, when I was younger, ego played a part, getting the gratification, the gratitude, not the glory, but people saying, "Oh no, well done," all that sort of stuff. The presentations does do something as a young bloke for the ego, and as I'm getting older, I'm losing that. But how much of this addiction was wrapped around ego, do you think?
Yeah, that was a huge topic for me. My ego definitely drove a lot of my expeditions in the earlier days, especially my second one. My second one was to walk around Stewart Island, which was a slightly smaller one. It was still 30 days, but the purpose of that was purely ego. It was it was my first big Instagram kind of expedition. It was the first time Kathmandu had come on board and they were sponsoring me, and it was totally ego driven. And I told everyone I was going to walk around the coastline because I'm this big, adventurer who does coastal expeditions. And I got about 15 days into this journey, and I suddenly realized that this is not fun. I'm pushing myself past the point of enjoyment, and I'm suffering every moment. I was breaking down in tears, and I was in pain. My shins and legs were cut up from walking through scrub. I went to the lowest place I've ever been on an expedition before, and would literally take 3 or 4 steps and break down and cry again. I'd scream for my mum. I was in a dark hole. And it took me a long time, about 4 days, in my own head to come to the conclusion that I'm not having fun, so I'm wasting my life. So I'm doing something out here that I've decided to do. It was my choice to go to Stewart Island, but I'm not having fun. So in order to change my whole perspective and change the whole adventure, I just had to change what I was doing and change the way I looked at what I was doing so that it was fun and it was enjoyable and wasn't about impressing those people online, but it was about learning for me. Like, that's been the biggest takeaway from all the expeditions is learning. Learning's the addiction here. It's not necessarily adventure, but it's learning about the mind, the body, soul, spirit, all that sort of stuff. And that all comes out in these adventures in a very raw and primal kind of way. So for the first time in my life, I pretty much separated myself from my ego. I'm not sure if you know much about masculinity and toxic masculinity, if that's something you've talked about, but I was being driven from a very toxic place. So I was pretty much like gonna complete this adventure purely because I wanted other people to say, well done, congratulations, you did it, hooray. And when I took that turn and decided that, hey, I'm just going to change this adventure so that it's fun for me, it was probably one of the single greatest things I've ever done in my life. Sure, I didn't finish what I said I was going to do in the beginning. I still got to the point that I was meant to finish at, but I had so much more fun, and I enjoyed that expedition far more than I would have if I had just pushed through. I wouldn't have learned anything else about suffering. So,
and we haven't talked about toxic masculinity so much, but we have talked about the internal versus external drivers and that aligning to your higher purpose. So, whatever drives you internally or externally, be clear about that, because if you're going to have a life-changing adventure, if you choose to do it, now with COVID, we haven't chosen to do it and we have to go through that same journey. But if you choose to do it, you really need to know why you're doing it, and what drives you has to be really strong and really true. And I think everybody has to find that for themselves. So I think, for you, if that's finding your joy or fun, we had a woman talking about, finding joy, and that's, what you did, or the learning, gratitude. I think. Yeah, having
gratitude in those situations. And I can relate to this. I mean, I broke my leg on a 100K run, as one of my sponsors, the North Face.
And kept running.
And at the 12 kilometer mark, I broke one of my bones in my lower leg and was too proud to stop. And I got through 88 Ks running on it, blew out my time. I was trying to aim for like 13 hours for this 100K. I ended up doing like 19. And I look back on that as one of the biggest failures in my life. That I was, don't get me wrong, incredibly strong brain and mind to be able to do that. But like, I should have listened to my body, and what was I trying to prove, and who to, and what's going on. And it was a great learning lesson for me, but it was one of my biggest failures. And I'll never do that again. It sounds like Stewart Island, you had that on a bigger scale because you're in the middle of nowhere for 30 days walking around this thing.
And I think it's interesting that, when you talk about your addiction to adventure, and that ultimately what set you off on the path of the first adventure, and a little bit I know from Justin, this is similar. It's like you were kind of running away from something, or trying to prove yourself. And so, but those adventures are finite. So when you come home, how do you, and how do you marry coming home and your purpose to living every day to the fullest? Because if home is a space that you're running from, or presence is a space that is uncomfortable if you're not doing something, have you figured out through your 27 years of wisdom, Brando, how do you merge those two things, if that makes sense?
I think, like, right now, coming back from Australia is what I've been on a journey trying to do. It's just a totally different kind of adventure, and I've chosen to not pursue another adventure right now, purely because I want to be able to be the best version of myself, not only when I'm out on these big adventures, but when I'm at home. because at the end of the day, when I'm at home, that's where my family, that's where my friends, that's where everyone that actually matters to life resides. I go out there on these big expeditions, and sure, I matter, like, first and foremost to my life. I see, like, me as important, and then everyone else is at the same level, but if I don't look after myself, how can I look after anyone else? So I think, to answer your question as best as I can, how do I marry those two parts of life together? Well, the way that I've done it so far is by really sitting and reliving those experiences. Because I've been go for so long, I haven't actually even stopped and had the opportunity to look within and apply the lessons that I've learned on these expeditions to my own life. They're all there. I've learned hundreds and thousands of things while I've been out on expedition, but never stopped
to reintegrate them.
And reintegrated. And the only way that at the moment I really know how to make sense of that and how those two things could work together is by finding the elements of those journeys that I can control in this, reintegrated life and apply them to it. And there's so many different ways I can do that. And right now, meditation and breath work and yoga, they're all huge things in my life because they help me to reach that same place in my head that I am in when I'm cycling for like 14, 15, 130 days straight.
Yep.
And that's something that, I value and hold very, very highly in my life in terms of things that are important, is that opportunity to look within and to work stuff out. Because if you don't work things out, once again, another cliche like quote or saying is, if you put the things in the bottle and just forget about them, eventually the bottle breaks because there's too much pressure and they all come flooding out. And emotionally speaking, it's exactly the same. If you don't process feelings and emotions and traumas throughout your life, then they're going to come back and they're going to be a whole lot more complicated than they were to begin with. So I think, the only way that I can really describe reintegration into life is to just be and just live life, not try and control it or change it, but just take it as it comes. Because for me on expeditions, that's all that I do. I take every moment, every step as a new one. I don't worry about what's going to happen tomorrow, because if I'm living in tomorrow, I'm going to die today. And that's the expedition life. And it's the same, but on a slightly different, less extreme scale in real life. If you live in the moment and be present with what's going on right now, you'll never have a problem. Because in this very, very moment, there's no problem. There's only like this.
Well, I think
so.
And I think that's so interesting, because you go on expedition to be present and to get yourself in this state, yet in real life, and also to be able to handle uncertainty, just like you said. And on expedition, things don't go right. Like you're juggling a million things and you don't know how it's going to be. That's the whole point, is, adventure is an activity with an unknown outcome. So, but in real life, people think they can control it. Like I'm on the same bus every day. I go to work between 8 and 5. I have the same thing on Mondays for dinner. Then it's Taco Tuesdays and whatever. And I think that we forget, we're always looking for the future. And I think for me, and probably for Justin a little bit, COVID has forced you to slow down in daily life. So we've forced ourselves to slow down sometimes in expedition, but we've had to slow down in daily life, and we've been very uncomfortable sometimes in the unknown in normal life.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, I mean, like I'm pretty sure, like I'm pretty ADHD as well, and like it forces you not to be able to distract yourself in certain ways, and you're like looking around like, I don't like to be. I either like to be really still or not at all, or like and frantic. I've like got no time in between. It's one or the other, and I've realized that I've distracted myself with so much stuff, and it's hard for me to be present at times. But again, you're right. I mean, like I'm seeing so many parallels on an expedition. you have to take stock of your surroundings, and you're forced to do it because there's a consequence to your actions. And so this is what I'm talking about, the whole concept of adventure thinking bore from the fact that, it's about applying an expedition mindset to every day. And so this is why I think this is so powerful and so important, because I fall out of the trap when I'm at home. Yeah. I'm always forward thinking. I'm always not enjoying that present because I'm trying to not escape, but that's why I wanted you on. I'm so curious about the path. I could see it in your Instagram post, and when I was talking to you on Messenger, and I'm like, in some ways you've decided to really take the step that I haven't, and that's go radio, and I'm gonna approach it head on, and I'm gonna work this out. Because for me, I mean, the biggest distractions in my life right now that are stopping me, I think, are kids. You want to numb yourself sometimes with children.
But I think on the flip side, you're going to regret it if you do that and they grow up 100%. And you're not present. So this is the perfect time to remember that, if you're one of those parents that are always at work, and now your kids are climbing all over you as you're working from home, that can be very jarring. Yet at the end of the day, I think it's coming back to what do you value? And there's a lot of people are saying how much they've actually been liking working from home now because they're more present with, like you said, the people that matter are in their home and they're there more. And I think that that's a really interesting experience that a lot of people have had for the first time in their adult lives when you're supposed to be busy and doing things at a rapid pace to be of value.
So I'm taking notes here,
What was that? Sorry,
I'm taking notes from you. I'm going. All right, meditation, yoga. I'm going to get naked in nature. I've seen some of the photos you've been posting. Pretty awesome. They're epic.
Oh, you might as well be your most raw and authentic self when you're in nature because it's got nothing to hide. So
exactly.
Why should I?
I love it.
I think something I just want to come back to on that exact point as well is the reason why I started. Right in the very beginning, I was running away. Don't get me wrong. I was running away from a negative space and a negative life. But at the same time, from a more subconscious point of view, I wanted in the future to be able to bring a family into the world or bring some children into the world and have real life experience that I've learned, not been taught, that I've actually learned through experience so that when I am teaching whomever, my own kids, other people, I can teach them from a perspective that I know because I've tried it and I've tested it and I know what works and what doesn't work. And that for me was like where I started. So there was always going to be this point in my life. There was always going to be the point where I had to come home and I had to be like, right, now I need to focus on all the other things that I've been ignoring about myself, all the different layers of insecurities, like ego, just everything. I need to work on that now because in order to move forward and be like the best version of myself at this point in time, constantly changing at the next point and the next point, but in order to be the best me that I can, I need to sort out all my shit.
Yeah, I need to sort out my shit too. You're making me reflect on myself a little bit too much. Oh, this is great. This is the reason. Like, they're lessons that I want to learn.
It's free counseling for Justin.
Yeah, it's free counseling. I should be. I'll send you a check after this, Brando.
No, you'll send. Yeah, exactly.
Now, I just want to actually ask a question. Like, I know it's a little bit early to do this, but I mean, there's a question that came in from a mate of mine beforehand, and he's going back to, like, I suppose more the reason of why. I mean, this guy is a pretty awesome bloke. He's also gone through he went through a divorce fairly young, and I think that pushed him out to go out there and chase adventure in his life, and he really is doing it. So he wanted to query, what instilled your willingness to face massive risk and take big gambles, and he's curious to understand the change in that process over time. I mean, like, I suppose that comes from you having you as you said, you're taking drugs on a daily basis. You think about joining a gang, but what was that moment? Was there a moment where you were just like, this has got to change? And
now you're a plant person selling plants and hitting it.
That's a pretty amazing
That's a big
journey.
shift.
I've always been a plant person, the plants out there in nature or the plants that I tend to care in a greenhouse. The defining moment for me, I remember it very clearly. I I was driving along the road. We were going to buy some weed off some mates, and the guy that we normally buy off didn't have any, so chucked a Facebook status up. Anyone got any grass? And sure enough, someone made contact with us, and we went and met them at like a real public car park. I went over to their car, gave them $100. They gave me like a bag of weed, and I walked back to the car, and I was stoked. You know, this person had just given me my drugs. So get in the car, start driving away, and my mate in the back, he's like, "Bro, this is tea." And like he'd opened up the bag, and it was tea. And what this kid who had sold me the tea didn't realize is he didn't just take away my money and my drugs. He took away my ability at the time to feel good, to feel happy. You know, because that's what the substance did for me. It made me feel high. It gave me that exciting feeling that adventure gave me, and different aspects of life give me now.
Yeah.
So I lost the plot. I chased him down. I rammed his car with my car. I dragged him out in the middle of the road, and I started yelling at this like kid. He's like 16, and I'm yelling at him, screaming at him all over, you know, $100 and something that grows in the bush. And when I got home that night, I looked at myself in the mirror, and I was disgusted. I was disgusted that I could treat another human in that way. You know, I guess it was the first time that I looked at another person as another person rather than not me. You know, I was always just thinking about myself until I got home and realized the impact that experience could have had on this kid's life. Shouldn't have been doing what he was doing anyway, but still. And that was my defining moment of like, right, I need to sort my life out. The risk thing, how I've been kind of, everything I do is calculated. Like everything. Sometimes the calculations are too fast for the reason in my head, and the calculations just happen and I just act. 99% of the time, instinctually, I keep myself safe because I trust my gut. I trust my instinct. I trust that what I've learned throughout my life will keep me safe. The 1% of the time, I fall off the cliff, I roll down, and somehow don't break all my bones. But as I've got older, that feeling of fear and I guess the ability to be able to take bigger risks has been limited, not necessarily by that fear, but it's been limited by the reason in my head that says, if you do this and this happens, this is what could happen long term. You know, you could have a broken back. You could be in a wheelchair. Now, there's common sense, and then there's like fear. And I try to keep away from the fear and rely on the common sense. And if the risk outweighs the positives, I won't go near it. You know, I'm very careful about what I choose to do and what I don't. And that might sound strange because I chose to cycle across Australia, but in my mind and in my world, that's totally within my capabilities. That's like just what I know how to do. It's what I know. And it's the same for everyone, just in different aspects, you know, like with the learned behavior and the learned things that you've learned over time. That's what your perception of self and the perception of life comes from. It's just things that you've learned and things you've seen and things you've experienced. So,
and I think
for
that's
me, it's never been risk has never been like something I've thought about. It's just been acting.
Because it's funny because Justin, oftentimes people assume that you are adrenaline junkie seeking risk because you're a professional adventurer, when so often I've heard you say, no, I'm actually one of the most risk averse people you'll meet. If I do go into a situation, it is very meticulously planned. And that's what allowed me to trust both my instincts and Justin when we decided to take our 1-year-old to the outback. Because a lot of people judged us for being irresponsible parents, but we had weighed the benefit and the cost very strategically, and we weren't going to put our child in unnecessary danger. Of course, you are in different dangers out there than you would be in the city, but you mitigate those. You're not just doing it to do something that's careless.
Yeah, no, Yeah, I still stick to that. I mean, like, I don't want to ever be in a situation and where I've bitten off too much. And it's funny, like, for me, the biggest lessons I've had around that was when I'm not paying attention, where it's something that I've done multiple times over. So I feel like the risk has dropped down to a certain level, and you take things for granted. It was like spearfishing, and I was like, I'd gotten not cocky, but to a point where I was fairly comfortable and I was doing something I'd done before, but, just that one element of being inside a cave on a cliff line, and then this kind of roguish wave came in and I got swept up underwater, like into the cave, and I was like, the thought that went through my mind was like, shit, it's not going to be an expedition that does me in. I'm going to die trying to grab a lobster. It's going to be that moment that something I've done so many times over because I just cut
when
a corner.
You slip into unconsciousness.
I was just complacent, and it's just like, all right, well, that's what I've got to watch out for. So it was a great lesson. The only thing I did was bang my head, tore my wetsuit from chest to groin,
and not tell me about it.
I didn't tell her about it for about 3 months so that I could keep diving.
Brando, I wanted to pull on something that you just said, though. You had mentioned, how I mitigate risk is I trust my gut. When do you feel your gut most clearly in your life? Do you always hear it? Are there times when you hear it more clearly? And are there times when you hear it less clearly? I'm thinking, for me, that's when I'm doing something that's really aligned to my purpose. I feel like I can tune into my intuition a bit more. But if I'm doing something that I kind of know I'm doing for other people, I tend to start losing myself. What's the case for you when you're able to tune into your intuition, and when is that?
So I go out there on these massive expeditions because that in the last 7 years has been when I'm able to be the best version of myself, when I'm able to trust myself fully and wholly, and out there in nature where the only like elements of distraction are things that I've caused because I've put myself in that situation. Yep. When I can think most clear is when my gut is most trustworthy. Coming back, reintegrating, that's when it gets tricky. That's when trying to decide whether it's my own sense of like disappointment in myself for not doing the dishes, or if I left the oven on and the whole fire, like the house will burn down. There's just so many different things that happen in a regular life that don't happen out there. There's so much more saturation of information coming in every moment through Instagram, through the radio, through friends, through work colleagues. It's just so hard to focus on the feelings, the real deep gut instinctual things that help me to control like the best outcomes in my life. So that's where I come back to meditation and yoga and doing all of those things that slow the pace of life down. A rule that I've kind of started living by in the last few weeks is if I ever even think that there's not enough time in the day, I'm living too fast. I'm living way too fast, because there is a perfectly adequate amount of time in every single day to do what needs to be done. To do what needs to be done to be happy and healthy. As soon as you start piling things up and you're rushing, and if you're rushing, you're not getting the most out of everything, out of every day.
I love that.
Sleep's important.
I love that.
And so that's something that I've started living with.
And isn't that funny? What does that say about our culture and society in normal life, where rushing is deemed a medal of success?
Yeah, it totally is. And it's so silly. And it's taken me this long to realize, right back on that first expedition that I went on, that I was rushing through the whole thing to get to the finish. But in life, the finish is death. The finish is the end. Life. For so long, I used to tell people I knew what the purpose of life was, and I used to say it was to be happy. And that sure is. That is definitely a purpose of life. But the real purpose of life is to live. It's just to live life exactly as it pans out. And if you don't like something that's panning out, change it, because you have the ability to change most things. Most things are within your control, and if they're not within your control, don't waste time or energy on them. Just accept that that's the way it is and move forward. But if you can change it because it'll make your life better.
Yeah.
I'm hearing like I mean, what you're doing right now, post Australia, is you're taking stock of your life. You're looking at what motivates you, what makes you a better person. Did you do that beforehand? Did you ever take stock and look at yourself beforehand? Because, like, I'm just curious. Like, was that something that you did, or you just kept on sort of like numbing yourself and kept on going?
Yeah. So I've spent the last 7 years of my life looking for something. I've been searching. I've been soul searching. I've been trying to find myself. And it wasn't until I crossed Australia that I realized, I am myself. I create myself. I'm my own creator. I control most things. And it's just been such, in the back of my mind, a waste of all that time. But at the same time, without that growth, without that time to really analyze every aspect of myself, because I've hated myself for a very, very long time. For a lot of years, for the way I acted when I was a child, for the way I acted when I was a teenager, for the way my brain works, but like just the way I look, just so many different aspects I hated about myself. And once I emerged from the Simpson Desert, like I did the last little bit of the Simpson Desert. It was the hardest part of the Australian crossing because it was, 15 days with no access to water. I had to carry 15 days worth of water on a bicycle, and I was pushing that thing over
Through sand hills. Yeah. That's tough.
And when I emerged from the desert, I remember saying something to myself, well, actually to my dad, because he met me at the end of the desert. This is like such a powerful thing to be able to share a part of that journey with my dad. You gone?
Oh,
so it
we're
just
back.
cut out for a second. You said it's such a powerful thing to share that with my dad, and then it
All right,
stopped.
we're back, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
We're back.
Yeah, so I share that with my dad, but also, for the first time in my life, I decided that I am of my own liking, and that's all you need in life. You don't need anything else, because if you are of your own liking, then you don't have to worry about you, because you love yourself, and that's so important. You can focus on, helping other people to achieve that same feeling, and help your kids, and help your friends, and
and be comfortable in your own skin.
Such a powerful thing for me. And so to answer your question clearly, and yes, I have been trying to analyze and look at myself for forever. That's what this whole life has been about. It hasn't been about like the expedition. It's been about getting into my head and being able to look at myself in a way that has no influences from society, to recreate myself, to really just be me, the me that I want to be, not the me that anyone else wants me to be.
We are all the masters of our own destiny and ourselves, and just it's going to take us for people to go on this exodus across the Simpson Desert with a bicycle with 2 weeks worth of water, and when you come out the other side, I think you'll know the rawest form of yourself. I mean, pain is good for that. I mean, challenge is so good for that. It strips away all that crap that you put on as armor in society, and you just see the base elements that make up you as a human being. Oh, that's what I love about adventure. That's what I love about expeditions. It makes everything so simple.
And I think that's the challenge of reintegration, is bringing that simple that it seems like adventurers are able to find or seek out there and bring it here today to real life, and to be able to find that flow state when your kids are, not going to bed or you're feeling rushed. How do you bring that back, I think, is the reintegration that's so important, and to go forward in your life and merge a path that is authentically you, as you say, and not just fall back into stasis almost.
Yeah, and I think the answer to that is incredibly simple. It's like, everyone knows the answer. You just do it. You just start.
Yeah.
And you just keep going. You keep doing it. And you keep doing it, because like in an expedition, if you stop, it ends. It's over. So in any aspect of life, whether it's the dishes that need doing, or the bed that needs making, or the kids that need getting ready for school, You just do it.
Do it.
And that's the purpose, you know. It's living, it's life. You just keep going forward.
It's another adventure cliche that rings so true to me. I hate it when an Instagrammable cliche, you're like, it hits you and you're like, oh God, that's really true. It's the first step of a 1,000-mile journey is the hardest. And 100,000,000% the first step on our Outback expedition, that first step. And we had 2 carts, and we didn't even get this on film because we weren't filming, but we had 2 carts. We were like I think we were a month late. In the day, we were like 5 hours late. It was so heavy. Things didn't fit right. And we're going, and finally we're like, yay, here we go. And Justin and I got too close to each other with our carts, and the wheels and the axes locked, and we couldn't separate them. And we had to stop and take our harnesses off and redo it, and then go again. And so I do think that that's true, is that there's power in movement, and you just got to start. And the first step, don't underestimate the power of that first step or the challenge.
Yeah, I like the one thing that I've really kind of taken away from, or one of the things I've taken away from all my expeditions is there's really no such thing as failure in life. It just doesn't exist. It's just something that we create in our minds, determined by what other people think about us.
Yeah. No,
or how we look at ourselves. But really, not completing something or having to do something again and again and again and again, or deciding not to do that something is just life. You know, it's just a lesson learned. You tried it, you didn't like it, you move on. You tried it, it didn't work, you move on.
It's just
or you try again until it does.
Yeah, I think it's a more evolved thought than what we say. We say that failure is just gathering information. That's all it is. I mean, like, it's yeah, you're right. I mean, failure, there's only, I suppose, the ultimate failure, and that's if there's, you know, massive harm, injury, death.
You quit when you...
What's that? Quitting is not a failure necessarily. It's a strategic withdrawal.
Yeah, a strategic withdrawal, but if you just give up, or if you don't try.
Or if you don't try, that's a failure. Unless you've done all the sums.
If you don't try, don't get me wrong,
that's a failure. Unless you've done the sums, you've worked out that, you know, actually to go out you would... Yeah, anyway. So I think we get caught up in semantics.
And I'm just conscious of time because it has been an hour. I would love to... Are there any more questions that have come in, or do you want me to do a quick...
I'll have a quick look. So you have a chat and Felix just said hi and Gary's posted something. Felix, did you have a question? Because he just popped on. Gary said, this is relating to a further question from the past. It's like... Taking the kids, when you're talking about the kids part, taking kids out on your own expeditions is a great bonding experience. It's not always easy, but that's part of the adventure. Felix has just said, I mean, this has been very, very inspiring. So Felix, thank you so much for joining the show. I did have a question. I mean, a couple of people have asked this to me, and I want to talk to you about this afterwards. They've been asking about sort of, I suppose, Expedition Dust, you know, the trip. I mean, it looks like such an amazing journey. You know, did you have plans to make a documentary, or what's the go with that? I mean, like, just dive into that process, because you went out there and actually you filmed it, didn't you? Properly to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I had the intention in the beginning, as I have with all of my expeditions, of creating a film.
Yep.
And getting it put out there to inspire other people to not necessarily go on a big expedition, but just to live their lives and sort their shit out and just live. But, you know, to be completely honest, the biggest thing that held me back from that was the post-expedition blues.
Okay.
You know, the expedition depression. And that hit me so hard that I just didn't have the mental energy, or like I just didn't even want to think about it. And I guess during that time, I just kind of pushed everyone away that was helping me, and now that I've done a little bit of healing and I've kind of stopped, and I do definitely want to create an empowering film that helps other people to be them.
Well, I'd love to
will
talk.
happen eventually.
100%, and I'd love to talk to you about that because I want to help in that process. Like I really would. I mean, like I've made sort of 3 documentaries so far, and I see so much value in this space, and for that story not to be told, I mean, seeing the footage that you've got from the outback and from the other journeys you've done, it's criminal. Like it's criminal that doesn't get turned into something that can move people. So, well, let's talk offline to make something there and something happen. But you've written a book, yeah?
Yeah, I wrote a book about my first journey called Wild Boy.
Yeah.
And, I wrote that when I was 20 years old. So it's definitely an older version of me. But all the same is, it's a great story about a young kid who just decided to step outside the box and live life.
How can people get a copy of that? Because it's a fascinating... Like, I remember, when you were doing that trip, seeing bits and pieces about that and then post that. That's when I think I started following, like, your antics. And, I kind of wanted to get one of those cool hats you were wearing on some of your journeys. But
I love those sunnies that you were wearing in Expedition Dust.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you are much cooler than me.
I looked like a daggy... I don't even know, but... I definitely didn't look quite as hip as you did crossing
Actually,
the outback.
Can you teach me how to look good on expeditions? Because, like, I swear at the start of the outback...
you looked like Johnny Depp at one stage. You were
end.
crossing the salt pan, and there was a bit where he had his Fu Manchu. You get there.
Yeah, at the end I got there, but I mean...
I just looked dirty.
Beforehand, I looked like, and I'm going to say this because I looked like a Chinese tourist because I am half Chinese, but at the start of the journey, I looked like a Chinese tourist that had been bussed into the start point and was standing there. There's this great photo of me eating a banana, just looking like this. And I'm like, what the hell is that guy doing there? And then by the end, I think I weathered. Do you want to ask me a question whilst I grab a photo? Because I want to show everyone the photo of you at the start and end of the trip and just show them to everyone.
I mean, Brando, I thank you so much for coming on today. What you have packed into your 27 years of life is nothing short of exceptional, and I cannot wait to see the new insights that you are able to experience and share when you hit your 30s and gasp 40s and beyond. So thank you for sharing kind of what you've learned in your journey. Just so that we can recap, because this is all about learning kind of some processes to kind of get to the top of the mountain and come back better for all intensive purposes. I think some of your lessons about reintegrating is you're never going to be able to reintegrate fully, i.e. go back to exactly who you were, nor would you want to. And there's more for you. It's kind of a more concept of adaptation and understanding that we can and are able to adapt and change and move forward very quickly. Also, that the power in slowing down. I really loved what you said about rushing. That and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you feel yourself rushing, it's a time to check in because there's plenty of time in the day to do what you need to do. And if you're rushing, something's kind of gone out of whack. Did I get that right?
Totally, yeah. If like for me, how I run my life,
it's like a little alarm bell.
However they want to.
Yeah.
But, if I get to the end of the day and I'm like, oh, I wish there was more time, I'm going too fast.
Yeah.
Because there's always tomorrow, unless something happens while I'm sleeping. But don't even think about that. There's just always enough time to get what you need done. And if you're doing too much, you're doing too much.
Yep. And follow your joy, or live every moment to the fullest, and don't really figure out your why. And if that's for you, that wasn't doing things for other people, because that took the joy out of adventure. So following that why, and for you, that's learning, and it could be different for everybody, but really being clear on that, I think, was a big takeaway for me. And slowing down, that sometimes there is an element of adventure addiction, and going out to create that flow state of presence. And the reintegration element is being able to bring that back into present day, daily life. And tips and tools that you've used that are really strong are exercise, meditation, yoga, and that mindfulness element has been really important to get you to that place in the craziness of daily life with all of these inputs that we get, which are conflicting. Did I miss?
Totally.
Yeah.
I can't do that. What she just did then, my brain doesn't work that way. I can't.
Neither. I'm just like,
It helps.
I was like, how did you remember all that?
It helps me. It helps me synthesize, so it's great. But a question that we then follow up, and you've kind of hit all those things, so maybe there's not much more. But if you could give somebody who's struggling with reintegration, let's just say they've come back from a massive trip, or they've had a life-changing experience, maybe that's divorce or death or COVID, where they've been isolated, or Melbourne and Victoria is being isolated right now, and they might be really struggling with that. Can you give some tips about, how do you think about coming down from this mountaintop and moving forward positively? And something that they can do in their day this week, or, in the short term, to get them on the right foot?
I'm going to use the coming down from the mountaintop as like a really good example, because if when you're coming down from the top of the mountain, you're not present, the chance that you're going to fall off the mountain on the way down and not make it to the bottom, or make it very fast to the bottom, is very high. So my advice to anyone who, might be struggling is stop and take a few deep breaths and really just think about yourself and what you're thinking about. Am I thinking about the past? Am I thinking about the future? And if you're thinking about either of those things, stop thinking about them and start thinking about the present moment, because in the present moment you can control things. You can make changes. You can control most things in the moment. But if you're worried about the future or living in the past, they're things that are only going to cause grief and cause stress in your life. So reintegration is all about presence and being there, showing up. Not showing up for someone else, but showing up for yourself.
Show up for yourself. I love it, because I've got to do that.
You do that. Don't be so hard on yourself.
Oh no, I'm hard on myself because I'm trying to evolve. I'm trying to be a better person. Now, I just want to quickly show everyone the photo of you at the start of the trip, if I may. You may notice that Brando does not have. I'll just cover my face. There we go. That's him at the start of the expedition, and I believe this
Hipster.
Hipster.
I like the one where you have your goggles though, and your Schwami kind of like your beautiful wraps.
Head
and
wrap.
Yeah,
that's so cool though. Look at those photos. I mean, like, you've practiced the 1,000-mile stare so well, Brando. I'm jealous. So, like, I mean, at least you look like yourself at the start of an expedition versus the end. I lose about 40 kilos, and I could be a different human being. But
that's why you like adventuring.
I do like
you
it.
get
That's
to eat
why,
before
because I like to
and
eat.
after.
So I need trips to help me. So everyone, if you're trying to catch up with Brando, I'm just going to pull up his website here. Brando, where is it? I put it up somewhere. Oh my gosh.
Isn't it wildboy.com?
It's wildboy.com.
Is that right?
Well,
What?
Sorry.
It's a stripper website and it's not mine.
Oh God.
Wildboy Adventures.
Lauren.
Wildboyadventures.com.
Okay, let's reiterate. Wildboyadventures.com. If you want strippers, go to wildboy.com.
Okay, yeah, I mean, seriously. I mean, Brando, do you own the other website as well?
That's awkward.
Don't know. I can't find it, but yeah, we'll post it in the notes. I made a little slide for it, but post it up in the notes later. But it's wildboyadventures.com. Okay.
And final question, if there aren't any from people that are listening, is look, we are really excited about this concept of adventure thinking. How do you pull these lessons from out there in here today? Can you tell us of can you recommend somebody that you think is a fantastic adventure thinker that we should talk to?
Ooh, that is a very hard question because you've done most of the people that I would recommend already. Her name's gone. The girl that is doing from the Americas. Have you got her on your show yet?
Walking the length. Lucy
and her dog Wombat.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Actually, if you go to episode 3, you can jump on it. Yes,
she's a legend.
No, she's awesome. She is utterly phenomenal. And I said this to her, and I'll say this to you. It's probably the adventure I'm the most jealous of, because it's not an adventure. It's a way of life. It is awesome. My question to you quickly. Prod you. One more person. Do you have another person to think about?
Actually, super different story. Very, very like open honest person who's been through a lot. When I crossed Greenland, I crossed with 4 other people, 2 Australians and 2 Kiwis. And Bridget, she, I'll send all the information through to you, but she is just a very empowering woman. You know, she is just a very empowering woman.
Please do the intro. That'd be amazing.
That would
be
awesome.
amazing. All right, so we're going to drop you off, Brando, but stay online because I want to chat to you for a brief moment. But I want to say, oh no, that's Brando still there. And now it's just Lauren.
Now it's just me.
It's just me.
Thank you, Brando. We love you and appreciate your wisdom and can't wait to see the journey that you're going on now. And
There we go. Now we're back. Yeah.
And we love what you're doing with plants. Can you show us your overalls? We got a quick glimpse of that when we were setting up, but I think everybody deserves to see it. You!
Oh, wait, you're on green screen. Hold it there, right there, Brando, because I've got the green screen setting on you, so no one's... There we go. That's it. Look how beautiful that is.
Love it.
That's epic. It's just quite handy.
It's very cool. Brando's going to do a plant drop in Auckland. For those of you that don't know, he's turned into the crazy plant guy.
That's why he's sitting in the car. So I'll drop him back out. But Lauren, epic, great, awesome.
Thanks for all your tips and your insight. And your hard-won reflections. We really appreciate it.
Now, who is coming up next week?
Jess Watson.
Jess Watson again. So bang, here we go. Jess Watson is coming up. Now, I'll pull myself back in there, but this is going to be such a fun episode. We had to cancel last week, obviously, postpone it, but she's a phenomenal human being, and just, I've got an awesome story I want to share about Jess in the lead up to the journey. I won't tell the story now, actually. I'll tell it so that Jess is online. But it's going to be a really fun episode. I'm a big, massive fan of Jess. I have been for years.
And we love her topic. We kind of thought maybe she would talk about isolation. Well, because she was isolated as she sailed around the world for, 200 days or something?
Yeah.
But no, she's talking about audacity, which I love. Because audacity is one of those trigger words that kind of can seem, that's very... You have that audacity to say that, and I feel like it could have a negative content, or it's an audacious goal. So I think it'll be really fun to talk about audacity and audaciousness in the next episode with Jess.
It's going to be awesome, and also we want to ask you who we should have on. So let us know. Jump on. There's sort of the website's just down here at the bottom here, adventurethinking.com/live, and it's got links towards contacting us. But just send us a note on Instagram.
And thank you for everyone's comments and questions, because that really allows us to kind of connect during this time when we're all separated, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, which is fantastic. But if you've got a thought, let us know. But we will be back next week, Wednesday, the 29th of July at 12 p.m. Australian time. That's 7 p.m. the day prior in LA if you're over that way, or it's 2 p.m. if you're over in New Zealand. So on that note, we will drop out now and say thank you so much. See you next week, and happy trails.
Thanks, Brando.
Bye.